Okay, so I am attempting to record the first of what will become a series of podcasts where I essentially read news articles in which I am interested and then give my analysis. And so, for example, this morning, the United States, after authorizing long-range strikes into Russia, the Ukraine has made such strikes, and therefore there has been an escalation along those lines in that conflict, as well as the introduction of North Korean troops, etc., and Russia's recent statements about their changing of their nuclear doctrine, whatever. So those are the sort of stories that I am interested in, but the methodology of this will be that I want to be essentially looking at the stories and all relevant information at the time in order to assess and give some understanding of the way I'm looking at these stories. And so in order to kind of start on this and start with something fairly simple, I think that one story that I'm interested in analyzing, just because it's a relatively minor story in of itself, at the end of the day will probably amount to much of nothing, but I think is an interesting point of speculation to get some understanding of how I look at these stories, how I read them, and then how you can essentially analyze these stories and read them more effectively, such that you can understand and essentially, be informed without being misled to the degree possible. So, the topic for conversation today is Juan Soto. Juan Soto is an MLB baseball player. He plays currently for the Yankees, although he is a free agent, but was last seen donning the Yankees pinstripes in the World Series against the Dodgers, which they lost. But obviously, Soto is a great player. Along with Aaron Judge, he is the signature player for the Yankees, and so especially on the offensive side of things. And so obviously there's interest in Soto because from the age of 19 in 2018 with the Washington Nationals, second in Rookie of the Year voting, hitting .292, 406 on-base percentage, 517 slug for a 923 OPS, which has basically gone up in most of the years in his career, although you can make an argument that in San Diego there was some decline, at least in 2022, but for the most part, this is somebody who's been one of the premier players in baseball since they came into the league. And you can look at 2020 with the shortened season. He gets 47 games in there, but he's batting .351, 490 on base, 695 slug for 1.185 OPS. So to clarify the math of that means he's getting a hit more than 35% of the time. He's getting on base almost half the time. So he's doing his best Ted Williams, Babe Ruth, not Babe Ruth, but Barry Bonds impression as far as on-base percentage is concerned. And then slugging percentage being what it was when somebody's OPS is over 1, for instance. What that means is that the average value of their at-bats will be basically worth a single or more. So every time they go to the plate, their expected value is essentially getting to first base. And then if you have a 1.185, that means you're essentially getting to first base and having a chance for second base. And so from a statistical standpoint, it just means that when he came to the plate, his value is so positive, it's almost as if him getting out is not a relevant consideration. It's not even it's not the outcome with which you're most concerned because of how great he is. And so when you look through his career, he's had a lot of good seasons, obviously 2018, 2019, 2021, 2022, 23, and 24 stand out as far as wins over replacement type seasons. You can see it in the traditional statistics as well. And then just watching him in games, I think he's arguably the best hitter in all of baseball, in that his ability to hit is really is a matter of his patience, and he just has exceptional plate discipline with the Soto shuffle and yada yada yada. But really, he is a very, very, very talented hitter, and especially being a lefty in New York, you'd argue he can't possibly be in a better situation than to be playing at Yankee Stadium, short porch, etc. And as opposed historically to the right-handed hitters that the Yankees have had, but it's, based on the dimensions of the ballpark, it's not as beneficial to be a right-handed Yankee as it is, let's say, to be a right-handed Boston Red Sox. Whereas being a left-handed Yankee in the tradition of Babe Ruth, they've incentivized it by having some of the shortest fences in Major League Baseball. So, and they don't have a 37-foot wall in right field. But anyway, so discussing Juan Soto and his free agency, you can see in his career that he's already been on three teams, that's right. The Washington Nationals first, when he came up with them. And I think it's important to note that he's already won a World Series with the Nationals. And so from jump, he's been one of the best players in all of baseball. And, he's won pretty much immediately. So there's no real questions of whether he can win. It's only the questions of what the circumstance ought to be to best utilize his talents while arguably getting him as much money as possible. And so, he's hit a good amount of home runs in his 7 years. He's hit 201 home runs, so over 162 games. He averages about 35 home runs, 102 RBIs. His career batting average is 285 with a 421 OPS, 532 OPS. So he's an exceptional hitter, and we don't even need to get into the fact that he's probably not a good defensive player, probably not a great base runner. Frankly, who cares? That's not, when you have a hitter of this caliber, that's the thing you're concerned with. And so, watching him during the playoffs this year for the Yankees, I was extremely impressed with him and his performance, particularly in light of Aaron Judge's struggles, his home run against the Guardians, other things. He really put on a show this postseason, and so he showed that he can be a signature Yankee and perform well, get them to the highest place in baseball, which is competing for the World Series. And so there's a lot of reasons to think he has every reason to go back to the Yankees after re-signing with them in free agency this offseason. You would think that off the World Series run that they would be even better positioned to make their offers to him and be confident that he would accept it. The complications with that are twofold. Number one, they didn't win the World Series, which I frankly don't think is the most relevant consideration to his signing, but I think it has a small amount of relevance, as small as you can basically give it while acknowledging it exists, and then kind of sweeping it to the side as a relatively minor consideration. But the main consideration for Soto is going to be money. And so this is not to criticize him at all for that. It's a goal, and he's represented by Scott Boras, and anybody who's a baseball fan, frankly, any Red Sox fans with their histories with, Alex Rodriguez making his silly announcement of his free agency in 2007 and all these other things. Scott Boras is a agent who tries to get the most money and the most return for his clients. And, in recent years, he's been having a bit more of a struggle, I guess, to get some of his higher-end clients like Jordan Montgomery, Blake Snell, others to be able to land in the situation that would be best for them or the situation they eventually sign in. You saw with Blake Snell this season that he wasn't ready to go at the beginning of the season because Scott Boras had essentially told him to be hardball in these negotiations in the off season and arguably not representing his clients very well in those matters and leaving them in positions where they had either poor seasons or poor stretches of the season, which arguably wouldn't have happened if, Blake Snell had known that you need to go to spring training in order to warm up and actually appreciated that and not let Scott Boras just tell him it doesn't matter and you can show up whenever you want. And so I look at Scott Boras right now and I think that a lot of shine has come off of his star. However, that's a transient sort of conclusion to draw because he's still in the game, he's still an agent, he's still representing guys like Soto, and I think you could make some sort of argument that if he is able to represent Soto in the matter of his free agency, and especially, quite frankly, if he's able to get a team or multiple teams to be ready to significantly overpay, even all the things that I've laid out about Soto of how wonderful a player he is, you really do have to question the idea that he would get the amount of money that Shohei Ohtani did last summer, given the fact that Juan Soto is never going to pitch in the MLB at a Cy Young level, and therefore his, not to say his only value, but the vast majority of his value is tied up in his hitting, and, there's not a lot of precedent for paying a position player as much money as Shohei was paid last summer, and so it makes it seem as if that is really not precedent that can be applied to Soto. But all the speculation since the beginning of the free agency after they lost the World Series has essentially been very consistent with what Soto has maintained over the course of his career, which is that he wants to play for the most amount of money possible. And so I believe that the Washington Nationals, before they traded him to the Padres, had made him a 15-year, $450-some million offer. I should have the specifics in front of me, but it's irrelevant. In any event, it was a long-term, big money contract, but not necessarily for groundbreaking average annual value sort of returns. You compare it to a Mike Trout contract or even a John Carlos Stanton or something, and relative to the eras and stuff, I don't think his offer was really quite as good as the overall price tag made it seem like, and I don't think he was going to re-sign with the Nationals, and I think they knew that, and so the Nationals recouped their value for him by trading him to the Padres, and then the Padres had him for a while, but arguably the Padres have one of the weirdest situations in sports where they've been paying seemingly exorbitant amounts of money to certain players. You look at Xander Bogaerts, to them giving him an 11-year, $280 million deal, and I'm the biggest Xander Bogaerts fan out there, but I think it's pretty clear that Bogaerts is not a $280 million contract worthy player at this point in his career, and kind of makes you question a franchise that would invest so much money in so many different shortstops when they already had Tatis and they already had Machado. What's the real value of bringing in Bogaerts as opposed to like Bogaerts on the Red Sox provides, I think, much more value. But anyway, you look at the Padres, and they bring in Soto and they allegedly have opportunities to make deeper postseason runs and aren't really successful in that, and then they send him to New York for this past season, and he plays very well with New York, so he can play well in kind of a variety of contexts. But the Padres, I assume they may have paid him if they thought that they could have, but again, their situation is strange because they're paying out lots of money for certain players, but it doesn't seem like they necessarily have the capacity to pay for a guy like Soto. But then every time there's somebody available or on the trade market, it seems like the Padres are involved and active. So, I'm not sure exactly why the Padres gave up on Soto, or at least the idea of signing Soto. But now we're in a position where arguably the Yankees should be in pole position to sign Soto. And this is where we are in terms of getting to the more format of how I want to do this podcast, is to really just straight up read news articles and read things from the beginning, noting kind of the days that they came out and all those sort of relevant things, and then to putting all those articles in context after I've already talked about Soto's value as a hitter and all these different things. So give me 1 second because I want to pull up the gambling odds on this. But what I'm really interested in is analyzing a particular story about Juan Soto and the Red Sox. So, starting, and this is from MassLive.com, and this is an aggregate of previous ESPN and New York Post? Yes, John Heyman, the New York Post. So from November 12th, they're essentially aggregating this information saying the Red Sox have signaled they're looking for ways to dramatically improve the club this winter, and the obvious context of that is them cheaping out on Mookie Betts and Xander Bogaerts and Kyle Schwarber and all these other guys that they've had over the past several years who they've either let go or traded, and seemingly nonsensical, and especially in the Betts trade, honestly insulting to the Red Sox fans to say that a franchise making over $500 million in revenue can't afford to pay more than, less than half of that for the players' salaries. I just think they should have had a greater investment over the past few years, and arguably Mookie is the biggest part of that, and whether or not he would have actually re-signed with the Red Sox is essentially irrelevant because we know they didn't seriously try, and they traded him, and the pieces they got back from the trade have yielded horrendous returns. And so when you think about trading somebody who just won the World Series on a team with however many other MVPs on it, you just have to think the Red Sox are, idiots for having traded him. However, reading this article from November 12th, and it says that the Red Sox are among the teams that are going to meet with free agent superstar Juan Soto in Southern California this week, according to reports from John Heyman of the New York Post and Jeff Passan of ESPN. Soto, with super agent Scott Boras at his side, is taking initial meetings with suitors, likely at Boras' office in Newport Beach. Mets and the Yankees, seen as the favorites to sign the 26-year-old phenom, have meetings scheduled. According to reports, so do the Blue Jays, Giants, Dodgers, two mystery teams, and the Red Sox, who make up the 8-club group of teams in the mix. Tampa Bay Rays are known to be interested as well, but price is a concern with their small market status. And so when you look at the teams that are included in that list, you can make an argument that essentially you could have put this list together without any particular information about the situation. In other words, speculating that Soto is going to meet with the Mets and the Yankees, that the Blue Jays are interested after their interest in Ohtani last year. The Giants, who are always speculated to be in on guys like Aaron Judge, signed Blake Snell last offseason, and they're a premier franchise. The Dodgers as well, although the financials of them putting however much money into the future in these deferred contracts, I think, is suspicious at best. But then you get two mystery teams, which what does that even mean? Let's just ignore that because that's not specific. But clearly the Red Sox are specific part of the interest here, and it says from Jess Passon's article, and again, I'm ripping information straight from Passon, so I apologize, because he wrote, after trying to land Shohei Ohtani last winter, the Blue Jays are serious about adding a star along Vlad Guerrero Jr., have targeted Soto, another team, with Soto at the top of its want list, the Boston Red Sox. They have a meeting on the books this week with Soto, and like the Red Sox, their aggressiveness extends into the starting pitching market as well. So within this initial article, you can see that the Red Sox are essentially a team involved, not necessarily the favorite to sign him. That's noted towards the end of this particular article. And Jeff Passan, in his article, saying he's expecting the largest non-deferred deal for him, so about 13 years, $600 million, which again cuts about 2 years off the offer the Washington Nationals gave him a few years ago, and adds about $150 million onto that. So that's arguably that would be a really good deal for Soto. I just don't, frankly, think that sort of investment would, frankly, be a good idea necessarily for a lot of teams. I'd be kind of confused as to why the Dodgers would do it, given how much money they have to already have committed to their team, that they would even have the funds to do that. But maybe they're letting go of Teoscar Hernandez or whatever. But anyway, in this article basically says that the Red Sox are in on starting pitching, which obviously they need help with pitching, don't necessarily need as much help with their offense, as has been a topic of some of the articles that have been written. But according to this initial article, and the way I kind of looked at it, is, Soto being mentioned, or the Red Sox being mentioned in conversations about Soto, is essentially a nod to the history of the franchise, their ability in the past to compete aggressively for free agents and people on the trade markets and things like this. And so them being on this list, you could almost write off as pure speculation, almost as much as the two mystery teams or the Blue Jays, because, again, just because the Blue Jays or the Red Sox or two mystery teams want Juan Soto doesn't mean that they can have him. Soto has to want to sign with your team, and if he wants to sign with your team, you'd arguably think there's a good reason for that, and the reason's probably because you've made the highest offer to Soto, but allegedly the team that's actually going to make the highest offer is most likely the New York Mets, not even the Yankees, because of certain conservative comments that that Brian Cashman has made during this process. And so it's not clear that that the Yankees are actually going to pay all the money they would need to pay for Soto, although you could argue misdirection, you could argue they are going to pay him, or they'll want to match him once they know somebody's going to pay him a certain amount. But then it's like, will you get the opportunity to match? And then, let's imagine an even slightly more unlikely situation. What if, let's say, he's to sign with the Boston Red Sox? Now, again, why would this be a good idea? Obviously, Soto's a great hitter, and a great hitter should make your team better. And so that seems to be literally like the thrust of why the Red Sox are interested in Soto, because otherwise their offense is pretty good, and again, they need more help with pitching than with Soto. So Soto is not necessarily the greatest fit as far as what the Red Sox need. He's not Kurt Schilling in 2004, where boom, now we've got another ace in the rotation. Boom, now our team is even better. Like, adding Soto is a much different sort of acquisition, or would be, for the Red Sox. And so, knowing that they were going to get a meeting with Soto, then the main article that I wanted to kind of analyze in this whole thing, from November 15th at 3:38, updated at 3:38 p.m. or a.m., but published at 2:46 a.m. on November 15th. And it says, it's by Sean McAdam, and it says the Red Sox met with free agent Juan Soto in Southern California Thursday night, according to a source with knowledge of the get-together in what was termed a, quote, productive first session. Team President Sam Kennedy, Chairman Tom Warner, Chief Baseball Officer Craig Breslow, Manager Alex Cora represented the Sox, offered a formal presentation to Soto and his representatives, including Scott Boras, signed to introduce Soto to the team. Meeting lasted approximately 3 hours. Soto was said to be impressed by the Red Sox presentation, which included a video taking note of the franchise's history of star players from the Dominican Republic. They're probably talking about Manny Ramirez, David Ortiz, also probably Devers and others. But the Red Sox laid out their plans for the future, highlighted the crop of soon-to-be arriving top prospects while giving a detailed outline of ownership and Fenway Sports Group. The Red Sox did not discuss money or term with Soto, as the meeting was largely introductory and informational in nature. Boston did not make a formal offer at this early stage in the free agent process. Soto, 26, may be seeking a contract for longer than 10 years, and the total value of the deal is expected to top $500 million, with some estimates pegging it equaling Shohei Ohtani's landmark 10-year, $700 million contract with the Los Angeles Dodgers. Soto is set to remain in Southern Cal through early next week for additional meetings with teams Yankees, Blue Jays, Mets, among others, known to be interested, blah, blah, blah. So that is the article that essentially set the internet on fire a little bit by claiming that the meeting was productive. So what you read in terms of the details of this article that slightly undercut the impact that the headline has had is that they didn't discuss money or terms with him, and so they're essentially just trying to present themselves as an option to Soto if Soto wants to have them involved. Now, are the Red Sox trying to drive up the price so the Yankees have to pay him more? Are they just trying to essentially do this because they know they'll not sign him, and therefore they can say and do basically whatever they want, try to make themselves look as good as possible so that fans like myself don't continue to watch the Red Sox year after year and think to ourselves, holy shit, how did these guys not invest in a guy like Mookie Betts or extending a guy like Xander Bogaerts when the team, seemingly close enough to being a serious contender, if you look at 21 with our ALCS run, or this year with how the team was playing at certain times, if they had just had slightly better starting pitching, arguably the Red Sox, if they just had held on to Chris Sale, that they could have been in a much stronger position to compete this year. And it's just frustrating as a Red Sox fan to know that they're really not competitive, especially with the Yankees, because even if the Yankees are better than the Red Sox in a given year, it's always fun when you know that the Red Sox are actually going to compete and you can enjoy the games that they're going to play against the Yankees. And so this article kind of gave a hint that the meeting had been productive with the Red Sox, which, what does productive mean? It's sort of a vague term. It's according to sources with knowledge. So we have to look at this as, where is this information coming from? Is it coming from Boras and his team to essentially to thank the Red Sox for having a good meeting, even though he knows it's not going to go anywhere? Or is it, the first sign that Juan Soto is actually going to sign with the Red Sox? I doubt that. But this is just something that I think is interesting, because you see these sorts of articles on websites like Nesson, Mass Live, etc., and they really are kind of the Politico of these sports journalism niches, whether it's in Boston with the Boston sports media, or in New York with their media. Whatever the heck goes on in LA, I honestly don't know. But this sort of speculation is great fodder for sports discussions. But if we look at the details that are allegedly surfacing from the Red Sox meeting, it's really not the most substantial, but it paints a picture of the franchise where, Pedro is the other one who's from Dominican Republic. I'm a moron. But, so it's saying in this article here on Nesson that it's that the Red Sox likely wouldn't make a formal offer until he finishes all his other meetings, and therefore they're going to wait till those meetings are done. And so there's people writing about this, and if we were to look at the gambling markets, which I've been trying to pull up because I've had Soto's statistics up for this whole time, so I can reference those, but I wanted to specifically reference the gambling markets because I think in this modern era where gambling is legal and promoted everywhere, that it's a really interesting point of analysis to look at gambling markets and to see what it is that they're implying is most likely, and or whenever you're looking at gambling markets, they're always trying to get kind of the equal money on both sides sort of situation, and therefore that whatever the odds are listed as could be really a matter of speculation, people trying to make money off the gambling market of it. But I think, as this is pulling up relatively slowly, if I'm not mistaken, when I look at these lines for who's favored to bring him back. So looking at the odds according to BetMGM, and it says here that Juan Soto the Yankees are minus 120 to sign him, so they have the best odds really by far. The Mets are plus 150. That's a 270 swing between them and the Mets, but considering that Soto was on the Yankees and the Yankees just went to the World Series, you might think that the Mets might be closer to the rest of the pack, because the Dodgers are plus 850, the Blue Jays are plus 1200, and the Red Sox are plus 1400. Then you've got the Cubs, Giants, Nationals, Padres, Tigers, Rays, Mariners, and most of those teams have been linked to him. I don't know why the Padres would even be on this list if they got rid of him at plus 4,000, but it's pretty low numbers. The Tigers are, I would say, unlikely to sign him. Tampa Bay they were on the list of teams talking about Soto for some reason, but their roof just got ripped off, so I think they have other problems to deal with, and I don't think he's going to the Seattle Mariners. So when we think about the two mystery teams that might have been in the previous articles, just based on this article right here, it would seem like one of those is probably the Chicago Cubs, given the fact that they're plus 2,000 and the Giants are plus 2,000, and they're supposedly on the list and the Cubs are not. And the Cubs do have that kind of money, so maybe it really is the Cubs or the Tigers or maybe even the Padres that are one of the other two mystery teams. But when you look at it from a gambling perspective, I think you would say, and I'm not understanding necessarily where good value is as far as you putting $1 down and trying to get the most bang for your buck, but based on the gambling odds, it certainly appears like the Mets have a a decent chance. I might put that at like a 25 to 35% chance that they may get Soto, and the Yankees kind of have like a 40 to 50% chance of getting him. And then, it seems like the Dodgers would just have the next best chance, but at 850 as opposed to 150, it's obviously about, like 6 times less likely that this is going to work out that way for the Dodgers. And I'm just skeptical they would pay that money out again because of how much money they already have committed. So, and then the Blue Jays are higher on the list than the Red Sox, but I think that's only because of their demonstrated interest in Ohtani last year. So, again, when we look at these odds, what this tells me is be rational. He's not signing with the Boston Red Sox because they're plus 1,400, and that would mean it would be kind of coming out of left field for him to sign with the Red Sox. And so that's the main thrust of the things that I wanted to go through. But I think at this point it'll be important to kind of go through some more articles. So from today, Adam Wells' Bleacher Report, which was really the Politico of sports writing. But so the Yankees finally got their chance to sit down with Soto, and per John Heyman of the New York Post, Soto's meeting with the Yankees went very well. Scheduled to speak with the Dodgers next, and the next sentence says it would be weird if Soto's in-person meeting with the Yankees didn't go well, considering he's played the 2024 season for them. There's plenty of negotiating tactics being employed by Soto's agent, Scott Boras, and making sure everyone knows all of these meetings are going well. So this is part of the thing where when you read these things, Soto's meeting with the Mets went very well. The Red Sox meeting was productive. That makes it even honestly sound even worse. Because very well is better than productive, I would assume. But I think these articles essentially, you could make the argument as a sports fan that articles like this, it's questionable whether they should be written in the first place because they're purely speculation based. Even the person who has knowledge of these meetings, I mean, what are they going to say? That the meeting went terribly? You haven't really seen that. And like this article says, it's essentially the agent trying to promote their client, and that's why these articles are out there. And so trying to just go through and see if there's anything exceptional, because I have been hearing in the last several days from the New York media that essentially the trump card here might be that Steve Cohen, and that is the Mets owner's name, whatever his name is, he's essentially the richest dude in baseball, and therefore he is the one that, Michael Kay was the one saying this, that, so Michael Kay is saying, knowing Scott Boras, he's going to want it to be over 700 because that's the benchmark. And then, obviously that's not going to happen. And so you would think that essentially any team that's going to be willing to go essentially above and beyond and overpay for him is the actual team that should be considered most likely to get him, and that would be the Mets, just because they're paying exorbitant amounts of money for a team that they were decent this year when they should have been much better given how much money they put in and how they had to tear things down at the middle of the year. Whatever it was that they did, they don't seem like the greatest franchise. They just have a rich guy owning them rather than the dude who got bankrupted by Bernie Madoff. So they're in a different position than they've been in the past. And the Yankees, Hal Steinbrenner, already said that the payroll can't be $314 million like it was this past year, although I would really argue that the Yankees probably should be paying out an amount of money like that, and in that them paying less would frankly be an insult to their fans and the amount of money that the team makes. Like, don't be cheap. And so with that speculation, they're basically implying that the Mets have the best chance to get Soto because they're going to pay him the most money. And that means that the Red Sox are not getting Soto because they're not going to sign him for the most amount of money. So, yeah, MLB.com's Mark Feinsand column on Monday says that convincing Soto that their team represents his best landing spot is about more than money. Again, that's from the Mass Live article. So he asked the Red Sox about the club's commitment to winning, the ballpark, etc. So kind of obvious that he would ask those questions and be interested. But arguably, if he's also taking the meeting just to get information, then it makes sense that he would ask about those things and that the money wouldn't be the most important consideration because, again, they didn't make him a formal offer during the meeting. And so, if we're going to look at this realistically, the Red Sox are not going to get Juan Soto, but I think that the value in these sorts of news stories, even if it may honestly be the franchises or the players, playing the public relations game, I just think it's a good sign for the Red Sox to be competing for these premium level players where we simply haven't been doing that recently. Even our own players who've been developed and drafted by the Red Sox, like Mookie Betts, they weren't able to pay him enough money to make it so that he would want to play for the Red Sox. And so, and then them losing Kyle Schwarber and Xander Bogaerts and trading away Chris Sale is just, it seems to me that the Red Sox have not been as committed to winning in recent years, and you can make an argument that essentially John Henry and the Fenway Sports Group, which were mentioned in the Mass Live articles, that they have really not done a good job of making the treating the first thing as the priority in terms of Fenway Sports Group seemingly used to be Red Sox oriented, and now it's almost as if the Red Sox are a cash cow business in order to support Fenway Sports Group. And quite frankly, as a Red Sox fan, I don't care about the Fenway Sports Group insofar as they do anything other than own the Boston Red Sox. And so when the Fenway Sports Group is buying hockey teams like the Pittsburgh Penguins, instead of arguably paying somebody like Mookie Betts enough money to keep him in the Red Sox, I just don't know if the owners of the franchise have had the proper motivations and have been doing the right thing in recent years. So, but I just wanted to go through this sort of quickly to discuss the various articles and the sort of opinions that are coming out. Obviously, you've got this article from yesterday from MLB.com calling the Red Sox a sneaky contender to land Soto, and so there's good reason to speculate. It probably doesn't, but let's see. Yeah, so another article is essentially claiming that when the Mets made their meeting, and their meeting was described as going extremely well, that bodes badly for the Red Sox meeting. I think I've discussed that. Again, the Red Sox meeting was probably exploratory in general, and just them trying to give an indication to fans like myself that they are serious about signing big-time free agents, and more likely that they'll be in on bigger free agents in the future, although I think arguably the guy the Red Sox should have been targeting is last year with Aaron Judge, even though who fucking knows if the Red Sox would have ever been able to sign him away from the Yankees. But I think it's interesting to note the fact that Aaron Judge is a right-handed hitter having to play in Yankee Stadium, whereas I think we're well aware any sort of right-handed hitter like a Manny Ramirez sort of player is going to play better in Boston, hitting off the monster, hitting over the monster. And therefore, you would think that the Red Sox would essentially be incentivized to go after premium right-handed hitters, especially given their lineup, how many lefties they have, and again, the dimensions of their ballpark. And then again, from the Yankees' perspective, you would expect them to go more so after Juan Soto, and honestly, that their big commitment to Judge, even though it paid off dividends during the regular season, obviously, when you look at it from a more logistical standpoint, I think we can definitely say that Juan Soto should be the one that the Yankees are willing to invest more than $360 million in as what they paid for Judge. And I think that Soto is probably arguably even more valuable, especially on a game-to-game basis, at bat to at bat in the playoffs than Judge. And so I frankly think it's crazy that the Yankees aren't going to potentially re-sign him. I think if I was involved with the Yankees or associated with them, I would definitely be advising them to, make every effort and don't leave any stones unturned in terms of re-signing Juan Soto. And, essentially the finances are not necessarily the priority, as long as you can sign him for something less than what Shohei got in fake deferred money. I don't even want to get into the ridiculous nature of being able to defer $680 million of a $700 million contract, and the weird sort of shifting money around thing that the Dodgers seem to be doing. I find that very strange, but again, I think when you look at these baseball teams that are generating well in excess of $400 or $500 million in revenue, these organizations, and especially the Yankees, who probably generate more revenue than anybody else, they need to pay out, and they need to pay for this premium level player, and they can't afford to be cheap or to look cheap. And so if I was gonna really make my guess as to where Soto is going to go, I really do think that the gambling markets actually have it exactly right. I think the Yankees should be the number one team because he was on the team, and there's good reason to think he's probably going to go back, that they probably actually will pay him, and the Yankees are just trying to negotiate in the media to sign him for as cheap as possible while knowing they're going to have to pay him a large amount. And I think the Mets then would be next on the list from a money standpoint, and also for wanting to steal him from Big Brother. And then, the other teams on the list, you can just kind of rattle them off. It doesn't really matter as much. I don't think the Dodgers are seriously involved, and I also don't really think the Red Sox are seriously involved. But would I love to see Juan Soto on the Red Sox next year? Yes, I would. I'll say that unqualified. If the Red Sox can sign him, I want him on the team because of the caliber player he is, and it would just represent a more serious direction for the franchise than has been the case in the past several years. So that's my first attempt at a podcast of sorts, where I just kind of go through the news stories. In particular, in this one, I wanted to go through a specific news story and to really analyze it in depth. I know not everybody's going to be as interested in baseball and the Red Sox as I am, but just to give a kind of a demonstration of this is what I am, this is what I'm about, and this is how I'm going to discuss things. So format might be slightly different next time, but we'll see then.